Today, with the carousel system, we are milking these 800 animals in about 3 hours and 15 to 3.5 hours. We've built a structure that we call the kitchen. This is where all the farm's feed is stored. Here we store all the meal-type feeds. Each of these boxes is a mix, a pre-mix for a specific batch. So
800 animals. How much milk do you produce per day, roughly, in total?
around 24,000 liters. This is the compost barn system where the cows stay on bedding. It's all about animal welfare. It's highly regarded because the cow has access to wherever she wants.
I see. And what is that canister doing over there in the corner?
It's feeding. That's the machine, the automatic feeder.
Welcome to the Santa Fe Agroinstitute's YouTube channel. Today, I am here at Fazenda Arcego, where we will talk about the production systems they use, the management, and everything that has been working well for their production, which includes more than 800 lactating cows. So joining me today is Vinicius, the farm's veterinarian. Welcome, Vinicius. I think you should welcome me, right? Because I'm the one invading your farm here, but welcome to our channel.
Good morning. It's a pleasure, a great satisfaction to have you here on the farm.
Well, Vinicius, what is this place we're in?
So here we've built a structure that we call the kitchen. This is where all the farm's feed is stored. Here we store all the meal-type feeds, such as soybean meal, corn, cottonseed, and minerals. This is where we prepare and make all the diets. The machine, the mixer wagon, pulls up here, and with the front loader, we load all the ingredients to create the total mix for the animal's feed.
How was it before? How did you organize this kitchen before?
So before the kitchen, we used to load each ingredient individually. We had issues with loading weights and management, for example, and sometimes we loaded a bit more or a bit less of each ingredient. When we adopted the kitchen as a tool and started doing some premixes beforehand, we managed to minimize this standard error in loading ingredients, leading to a more homogeneous diet.
I see. So let's walk through this step by step. The feed arrives here and you place each one in its designated spot, right?
Exactly.
And then what happens after you place the feed in each spot here?
Each of these boxes is a mix, a pre-mix for a specific batch. So each mix has its ingredients. For instance, the high-producing batch will get some specific ingredients, and the low-producing batches will get others. Then we do the loading of pre-dried feed, silage, wet grain in the premixes.
I see. And what problem did you face before? When you said, we can't continue this way. If we want to grow more, we have to solve this problem. What was the challenge you felt in the kitchen that you overcame and that certainly impacted the farm's growth?
It was quite interesting, Jesse, because when we acquired a wagon that allowed us to generate loading reports, we noticed that we had many loading errors. This undermined the diet provided to the animals. Why? The nutritionist would come, create the diet, and there it was, programmed with X kilograms of a certain product. But during the loading process on the operational side, there were many errors. So we began to see the importance of having a structure, the importance of having organization in the kitchen. That's why we adopted pre-mixing, to minimize this loading error.
And what was this error causing for the animals?
Well, mainly due to starch, for example. We worked a lot with wet grain, which is a fermented grain. When we had an error, for instance, of 30 or 40%, which was common in daily management, it caused metabolic problems like acidosis. So, in addition to harming the animals, we had a deficit in milk production.
I see. Well, let's take a walk around here so we can get to know this kitchen well. So the wagon arrives here.
Yes, this is a small wagon that we use for feeding the animals outside. Soon, the other wagon we use for feeding the production batches will arrive. It pulls up here, then the front loader picks up each ingredient already in the premix. And what remains outside, silage, pre-dried feed, wet grain, is loaded into the machine.
This one here?
Then it mixes, the machine mixes, and distributes to the batches.
Right, and over here, what do we have?
Here we have some components, some ingredients. There we have cottonseed, soybean meal, soybean hulls, and minerals. Here we have ground corn. And it's important to note that we have labels on everything. Each section, each box is identified. Why? So that when the caretaker comes, he doesn't struggle with, oh, I don't know what to grab. So it's all visual.
I see. So organization, when I did my apprentice training at CNAC, I was about 14 years old, and we had a class on the 5 S's, which was about organization. So here, if there's no organization, you're going to have a big problem. The person might mix up the feed for the batch or make the wrong mix. So the signs, the visual cues, so that the operator knows exactly what they're handling are essential.
Exactly. In dairy farming, the main tool is nutrition. If you make a mistake there, the cascading effect is huge. It will harm milk production, reproduction, animal health, and so on.
I see. So without organization on the farm, without a professional way to handle the kitchen structure, the feeding, if there isn't a professional system, like in companies, if you walk into a factory or an industry today, everything is labeled, everything is clearly shown so that no one has doubts when they need to make a decision, then there's no dairy farm.
Exactly. And also in terms of waste, for example, today feed carries a lot of added value in expenses. So it generates a high cost. This means that if we have waste here, we also have an economic deficit on the farm.
And is this where the farm's biggest expense lies?
Yes, it's here.
This is where the farm's money goes.
That's why the caretaker needs to be very well trained because he's handling money. So much of what he does here daily, which sometimes seems simple, like handling feed and mixing it, actually involves a lot more.
I see. So if this were Formula One, he would be the driver.
Exactly.
The caretaker's the driver. If he doesn't know what he's doing, he crashes. And then everyone loses. So it's important for the caretaker to have knowledge. We have a book. Could you hand me the book, please? And it's a guidebook for feeding guide. It also covers the kitchen and storage. And sometimes for the caretaker or those working in the company, if you think it's important for them to have a deeper understanding of cow nutrition, as Vinicius said, this is the place where the company's investment is happening. This is where the money goes. Here, and all of this is transformed into milk later. We'll see that afterward. So if the person here doesn't know exactly what they're doing or has doubts, they might look for information, maybe Google it, search YouTube, or look somewhere else. But if they have a resource at hand, easily accessible, maybe by reading it, it becomes easier for them to clear up their doubts. So one of the things we're focusing on a lot at Santa Fe is bringing this content to the people in the field, practical and accessible content, so that when you're out in the field and you have a doubt, you can grab the material, look it up, and clear up your doubts during a break, in the evening, grab your phone sometimes, watch a class on feed management. There are classes with Dr. Mike Hutchins. I think that's interesting too because it's not just the veterinarian who has to do postgraduate studies. It's not just the agronomist or the animal scientist. The people working here, the labor force, need to be trained.
That's it. A very simple thing, for example, is the matter of dry matter. Sometimes when there's a fluctuation of a kilogram of dry matter in a certain feed, like pre-dried or even in silage, this is very harmful to the cow. Why? Because the cow consumes kilograms of dry matter. So if we make a mistake in adding feed at this stage of preparing the diet, it will harm milk production, it will harm the cow's health. So it's a domino effect.
I see. That's great. And what else is there to show us here in the kitchen? What do you think would be interesting for people to know? For sure, I did some research before coming to the farm, and from what I read, it didn't start out producing 22,000 liters a day. I'm sure of that. How was it in the beginning? I imagine that the person here on the farm was starting out with 30 liters a day. Is that it? How many animals were there?
So the farm started 40 years ago. It was a family activity. The cows weren't confined, they were pasture fed. It was a rotational grazing system, so they would go out to the field to feed, and then there was a small milking operation. Everything started slowly, and then they realized that by giving more comfort to the animals, improving their feeding, the production would consequently increase. So that's when they had the courage to start confining the animals, and today we've reached where we are.
I see. So back then it was a smaller pasture-based system,
That's right.
and it grew into this. This is just the kitchen, folks. We'll go over to the composting area next, then to the milking area. You'll see how big all of this has become. All right? I think if there are any questions left about the kitchen, leave them in the comments, and I'll give you a challenge. Take a photo of your farm's kitchen, or if you're an animal scientist, of the place where you work, the farms you serve, and the organization within the farm. I think it's fundamental to take photos of the organization, of the signs, and post them on social media, tagging Santa Fe, so we can repost them on our social network. This will encourage others who see it to work more organized as well. Maybe someone hasn't thought of it before. There are so many things here that you can't think of everything. And sometimes you see a photo and think, this idea is good, I can use this on my farm, I can apply this too. So if you take a photo of your farm and post it, tagging us on Facebook, Instagram, I'm sure you'll be helping many people across Brazil and the world, folks. Just Dr. Hutchins training, you didn't know this, but we're in 58 countries. Plus Iran, I say plus Iran because Iran doesn't show up in our system. So there are 59 countries with Dr. Mike Hutchins students taking his dairy cow nutrition management training. It's phenomenal. For example, in Iran, there are 130 students studying there, everything translated, dubbed into Persian, so that Dr. Mike's knowledge can reach everywhere. So we're doing this work. Sometimes people don't know, but for example, this book is in 7 languages. Mike's course is in 58 countries, and our goal is for this content to be known as well, to bring in things from outside that work, to show our own practices that work, and help people advance in dairy farming. And for those who aren't yet producing 22,000 liters of milk per day, this will certainly help them reach that goal.
Right?
And here, Vinicius, I'll ask the first question. What system is this?
This is the compost barn system where the cows stay on bedding. It's all about animal welfare. It's highly regarded because the cow has access to wherever she wants. She lies down wherever she wants. When she feels like eating, she comes to the feed alley and eats. When she wants to lie down, she goes to the bedding, lies down, and ruminates.
A frequently asked question on our social media is which system to choose. Sometimes people are unsure. Should I go for freestall or should I go for compost? Which one should I use? Why did you choose this system and not freestall, for example?
Well, each system has its peculiarities. We opted for the compost barn for animal welfare reasons. In our opinion, when the cow is free, she has more access to the feed alley. She rests better. So we adopted this system for those reasons.
I see. And does the economic aspect also influence this decision?
Yes, the system is a bit more economical compared to the freestall.
And here, in this particular system, has there been any issue where you thought, man, this happened, and it was a bit difficult to resolve, but we managed to solve it? I don't know, maybe the bedding wasn't drying or something like that?
So at the beginning, when the system started, there was more access to sawdust, more material. So the cost per cubic meter was lower as well. Nowadays, we have a bit of difficulty getting this material, and the price has also increased. In winter, when we have more humidity, it's a bit more complicated in terms of management. What does that management involve? It's about moving that bedding, working with it. Here on the farm, we work with 3 milking sessions. So after each milking session, when the cows leave the lot, we go in with the machinery and work the bedding. We turn it over to ensure adequate fermentation.
I see. And how did you work out the management with the staff, with the farm team, telling them, look, the management wasn't being done correctly? How did you find the right way that worked here?
Well, it's about training and motivating the operational staff because everything depends on them. So We assess the softness of the bedding, the depth of the bedding turnover. This allows us to provide more comfort for the animal. If the bedding is nice and soft, the cow will lie down. If the bedding is a bit harder, the cow avoids lying down. That's why it always needs to be turned over. It needs to have a good appearance for the cow to lie down there.
And for example, if you come here and look at the cows the way they are, can you tell if it was done correctly or not?
Yes, because if the bedding isn't favorable, the cows won't lie down. And the way it is today, they are lying down. Those that aren't lying down are eating. There are some cows in heat, but that's normal day to day.
Great. And for example, if she doesn't lie down, if she starts spending too much time standing, what happens later in the milking parlor?
His can lead to a drop in production. The cow doesn't have enough time to rest. She doesn't ruminate. It also negatively impacts her locomotion system. However, one of the attractive aspects of this system is the floor. We have less flooring, so there's less impact on the cow's locomotion system.
So you mean that the cow's hooves would have fewer problems than if it were in a freestall system, for example?
Exactly.
Because it allows her to step more comfortably. It's softer for her to step on, and her hooves will be better preserved. Not that there aren't hoof problems. I'm sure there's a hoof trimmer.
We have a monthly hoof trimming routine. There's a routine. Every month we work with hoof trimming. The hoof trimmer comes and applies a weekly hoof bath.
Very good. And here, this is where they stay all day, right? Why are so many fans running?
It's about cooling the cows, but also mainly for drying the bedding. Nowadays we work 24 hours a day with the fans on. Why? The bedding has a lot to do with stocking density. We notice daily that those lots that are more overcrowded with more animals per square meter have more difficulty with bedding drying.
So the fan helps to dry the bedding. So the fan is an investment for you because if the bedding doesn't dry, problems start appearing on the farm.
That's right. Then you start having hoof problems, mastitis issues, and so on.
It's interesting to talk about mastitis because there are many factors that can lead to a cow developing or having mastitis.
Yes.
And sometimes there are some details. For example, you just mentioned the fans. If the fans aren't adequate, if there aren't enough fans, and the bedding stays wet, it will cause mastitis in the cows.
Exactly.
So these are small details that sometimes the producer on the other side might be looking at this video and thinking, isn't it a lot of money spent on fans? No, it's an investment.
It's a necessary investment.
Looking at this herd, I believe, as I see here, the cows are wearing collars. I was going to talk about genetics, but let's talk a bit about the collars. Why are the cows wearing collars?
So, we are currently working with 100% of the animals being monitored. Given the farm's scale, there's no way we can constantly watch each animal. So, these collars provide us with information on the animal's health and heat cycles. Every morning, I pull up a report on sick cows, cows with decreased rumination, cows with decreased activity, and those returning to heat. So, all of this is possible through technology.
How many cows are in lactation?
Today there are 806.
806 cows, and what's the average milk production per day?
Around 30 liters.
30 liters of milk. So something that's clear to me, but maybe not to those watching for the first time. If a cow is being mistreated, does she produce milk? Does she produce 30 liters of milk per day?
No, Jesse, she doesn't, because the animal needs the right conditions. If the animal is deprived of food, if she doesn't have comfort in her housing, the animal won't produce what she's genetically predisposed to produce.
I understand. So you're telling me that if I visit a farm and someone tells me, just say my farm has an average of 30 liters of milk per day, then the cow is producing 30 liters of milk per day. I can be assured because I know that this cow is well taken care of.
Yes, indeed.
There's no way around it. Nature doesn't allow a mistreated cow to produce that much milk. This is something the market is showing. Some movements are bringing this up, saying that animals are being mistreated. The first thing that comes to my mind is that if I'm being mistreated, for example, at my job, I won't be able to perform at my best.
No, you can't.
There's no way. She only produces the amount of milk she does because she's well taken care of. Here, you look at these animals and you don't see any suffering. You see the animals lying down. You see calmness. There's no agitation, no shouting, no one hitting them. The animals are all calm.
Exactly.
And this also makes the farm produce so much milk.
Exactly.
800 animals. How much milk do you produce per day, roughly, in total?
Around 24,000 liters.
24,000 liters. You can see that there has been significant progress. When I watched your interview on the Milk Channel, you mentioned that the peak was 22.9 thousand liters.
Exactly.
How long ago was that, roughly?
About 3 months ago.
In the last 3 months, you've already reached 24,000 liters of milk.
Exactly.
Now, you all can't feel it here, folks, but it's really cold in this region. And without a doubt, does the cold help or not?
Yes, yes. Dairy cows suffer a lot from the heat. So if we don't have efficient ventilation both in the area where they stay during the day and in the holding area, later we'll see that in the milking structure, these cows will be affected. They will produce less milk and they will have reproductive issues because all of these are effects of heat stress, thermal stress.
But this was something that back when everything was starting, we didn't have this information, or at least it wasn't widely known. People didn't have this awareness. When did you realize that you needed to pay more attention to heat stress? Folks, we have a heat stress problem, and we're going to have to solve it. When did you notice this, and what did you do to solve it?
So when the farm started confining the animals, we began to have more information at our fingertips. Seeing this, we noticed that the cows exposed to heat on hotter days reduce their milk production. This, of course, has a negative impact on the farm's cash flow. So we realized that we really needed to provide this comfort to the cows. We need ventilation, we need sprinklers. On hot days, we saw the milk production curve fluctuating a lot. So from that point on, we started paying more attention to this aspect of comfort.
What was the first step you took regarding ventilation and cooling these animals? What did you do first?
So we installed sprinkler lines above the feed alleys where they eat, ventilation in the feed lane, and where they also spend part of their time is in the holding area. Why? When the animals leave the barn, they go and stay in the holding area, waiting for milking time. And there you have a concentration of animals. So we have a buildup of heat there, therefore we also need an efficient cooling system in that area.
All the animals are identified. They all have ear tags. What's the importance of this identification?
So the milking machine reads each animal. Each animal is chipped. It has a responder in its ear. And when it arrives for milking, the machine recognizes that animal and then sends its production data to a software system. This is so we can monitor them. For example, let's move this cow to a different lot. How is she performing? Many times, we cross-reference milk production data with the reports provided by the caller. We can detect diseases earlier. So we don't let the cow's condition deteriorate. We're always one step ahead. When the cow starts showing signs, we immediately start treatment. This has a significant impact on welfare because the cow doesn't become debilitated. We can diagnose diseases earlier. Each cow has a history. So we analyze and interpret these individual histories. Whether it's to see if this animal is standing out among so many others, we can identify these determining factors. Besides all the technical aspects, technologies, we also need teamwork and employee engagement. Why? Each operational area demands a great deal from people. So if they're not motivated by the processes, we won't achieve positive results.
I understand. So training, team management, and people management are fundamental.
Exactly.
It's the people who make all this happen too. They are in the day-to-day operations, and today's workforce needs guidance, training, and quality information so that when someone is working alone, for example, the people currently working in the feed lane, they know exactly what to do. There can't be any doubt.
Exactly.
Let's go take a look over there just to check out this process here on the farm. So folks, you can see here the animal is drinking water. Vinicius, what is the importance of water for the animal, for the cow? Why is water important for the cow?
Well, water is the primary food for the animal. Why? A large part of a living organism requires water. A significant portion of the milk volume is made up of water. So if this cow doesn't have access to good quality water, she won't produce what she needs to produce.
Why is she here? Why is she positioned at this spot, this water trough? What is the importance of having water close to where she's eating?
Well, it's about easy access. She comes off the feed lane, turns to the side, and there's water available for her right there. So when she feels the need to drink, she has free access to it. And it's important that this water is in good condition for drinking. And it's no good just having water available if there's no routine for cleaning these troughs.
I see. So, one important thing is that if you're at a restaurant and you're eating a plate of food with dry food at 35 degrees and you don't have a glass of water to drink, you won't be able to eat. You just don't eat.
You don't eat.
In this case here, if she doesn't eat, she doesn't produce milk.
That's right. If she doesn't eat or doesn't drink water.
So, it may seem like a simple or trivial thing, but if there isn't a place for her to drink water close to where she eats, it could have an impact.
Exactly. And also, when she comes out of the milking parlor, it's important to have water available because after milk is taken, she has a water deficiency. So she needs it as well. A large part of the cow's water intake happens after milking.
I understand. So folks, for this video, our challenge is the following. I want you to take pictures, show us your water troughs, where you work, if you have a dairy farm. Take a picture of the water trough so we can see it on our Instagram, on our Facebook. Share it because I think this is interesting. Sometimes we don't give water the value it deserves, but as Vinicius just said, if there's no water, there's no milk either. So these are small details. We talked about the fan, the water trough, comfort, data, the collar, and animal identification. But if you don't have all of this, the farm might not reach 30,000 liters of milk per day. So this is the minimum you need to do to reach the level that the Arcego farm has achieved. And now we're here at the Arcego farm's milking station together with Vinicius. Vinicius, what is being done at this moment?
So the milking process right after the milk extraction is finished involves washing the equipment. The machine itself does the automatic cleaning by spraying, and then we manually clean by scrubbing, spraying, and removing excess manure and other residues.
And why is this important?
It's all about the quality of the milk. The environment needs to be clean, just like a bakery or a restaurant. The place must be clean for the process to be done properly. If it's full of manure, we will likely have issues that affect hygiene.
I see. So for the consumer, for the person who goes to the supermarket shelf to buy milk, it's important to know that there's an entire cleaning and sanitization process involved in milk extraction. This is not just done haphazardly. It's not just about the cow entering the system and that's it. Let's take advantage of the fact that it's not milking time yet. As you mentioned, the first milking is at 4 a.m., then at noon, and at 8 p.m. So how does it work? Where does the cow go first? What's the first place she arrives at?
Here's the waiting room where the cows come from the lots, from the barn. They stay in the waiting room waiting for the milking time. After that, they enter this corridor. Each stall is a place where the cow stays. The carousel is made up of 48 positions. So the cow enters her spot, makes the complete turn where she is milked, and then exits this space.
So the cow comes to the waiting room. And this is where you mentioned the ventilation, cooling, and spraying. This is the spraying area, which is different from ventilation.
Exactly, we have both. There's ventilation with fans and spraying with water.
I see. So the cow comes here, and this place will fill up with cows. And it starts. Now, how does she know it's her turn to come in here?
Well, at first, when we were adapting the animals, they didn't want to come in. But once they got used to the routine, they started fighting to get in here. They line up in a single file. As soon as one enters, the next one follows, positioning herself to enter.
When the system changes, you have to adapt them again. Folks, the animals were used to one way. How was it before? What was the milking process like before?
Before, it was a midline system, but in a herringbone layout. 14 cows would enter on each side. They would line up in a single file, position themselves, get milked, and then leave.
How many cows enter here now?
Here it's 48.
From 14 cows in the milking line to 48. How did this change things for you in terms of time and milk quality?
When we had the old milking system, we practically had no time between one milking session and the next. They were almost continuous. Today, with the carousel system, we are milking these 800 animals in about 3 hours and 15 to 3.5 hours. So this means the cows spend less time standing. The milking process has become faster and more efficient. Here we work with a lower kPa pressure, so it's less aggressive on the cow's udder, which helps maintain better udder health.
Consequently, does this improve the milk quality? Does it improve, and has it reduced mastitis in the animals?
It has decreased. Before we had around 800 SCC, which is the somatic cell count. Today the farm is around 350 to 400.
So, just to make sure I understand, how did the farm go from 800,000 SCC to 350? Is it because of this system here?
So this system helped. It helped.
But just this system alone doesn't solve it.
No, it helped. Because before we worked with higher kPa, so it was more aggressive on the cow's sphincter. The sphincter is the physical mechanical structure that protects the internal environment of the udder from the external environment. Here we have less injury. So the hyperkeratosis in these cows has greatly decreased. Of course, we had to cull some problematic animals from the system, but the system has helped in terms of milking quality.
Now here's a question that many people watching might be asking. What is kPa?
kPa is the pressure that the machine applies to the teat to extract the milk.
So folks, what Vinicius was saying is that in the previous system, the pressure was higher. The vacuum pressure was higher, which as a result would slightly injure the cow's teat. With the new system, you've been able to regulate that pressure, reducing this discomfort and the fissures on the cow's teat.
Because the cow's teat has a structure called the sphincter. If this structure experiences any level of stress from this pressure, it will eventually stay open. If this structure stays open, it comes into direct contact with the external environment, affecting the internal environment of the udder.
And then the SCC went down. How was it for you, especially in your daily routine, in the lives of the farm owners, and for those working here, when you realize, wow, the SCC went down? Did it bring relief? How was that for you?
Certainly. Besides the increase in production in the animals, we managed to reduce this udder gland infection, which also increased the value of the product. Because we are paid for milk quality, fat, protein, SCC, CBT. So all of this contributed to an increase in the value per liter of milk paid.
So focusing on lowering the SCC from 800 to 350 is not an easy task, but it has guaranteed financial returns. Exactly. So it's also an investment. As you can see, this is a complex universe. We start with the kitchen, then we show that if there's no fan, the bedding won't dry. If you come here to the system and the vacuum isn't calibrated, it can injure the cow's teat. The animal, as I see it now, is a sensitive creature. If you handle it the wrong way, it will respond to you. And when does it respond?
It responds by reducing production. This animal ends up being culled more frequently because if the animal isn't efficient in the system, we can't keep it in the farm's routine because it has a fixed cost. If this animal's production drops by a certain amount per day, we can't maintain it. We have a cost to keep this cow here. That's why we invest in good quality machines, both for feeding and for milking, providing comfort for these animals because we want them to produce milk for the farm.
Now, out of curiosity, how much does a system like this cost to implement, more or less?
At the time, it was pre-pandemic, so we didn't see all the price increases, but back then it was around $350,000.
$350,000 to set up all this equipment, everything you see here for $350,000?
Just the machine.
Just the machine, just the milking system, but the structure, everything, the fan, the spraying system.
That would be an additional cost.
So if you invest $350,000 and the person doing the milking doesn't know what they're doing,
It will go wrong.
money isn't everything.
It's like having a Ferrari and driving it on a dirt road. The Ferrari would be the milking system, and the road would be the milker. So we need synergy between the two. The machine has to work well, but the person operating the machine must follow the process precisely as explained.
And how was the training for the milking staff? Because that might have also impacted the reduction in SCC from 800 to 350. How did that go? What were the problems you noticed before that you managed to solve here?
Well, we have quite a few training sequences. Why? When you work with the same thing every day, sometimes the routine ends up masking some processes, some steps. So every month we have training sessions to prevent people from getting used to making mistakes. For example, the simple act of drying a teat in a certain way has an impact on the CBT. Understand? So here we have a routine of double pre-dipping the cows, and we do the 3-jet strip cup test. We have to respect the cow's stimulation time. When you start handling the animal's teats, there's a time required for oxytocin release, which triggers milk letdown. So we must respect this stimulation time. All of this is achieved through training.
And this labor is at a crucial moment. This is a moment of high tension. People can't be on their cell phones. Just like in Sao Paulo, where they were on their phones while working, it's not possible here. Not at all. They must be focused. That's right. And then the cows start to come in. How many people work in the milking process?
Today we have 3 people at the start of the carousel. One is responsible for the double pre-dipping and the 3-jet strip cup test. Then there's another person who only dries the cow's teats, and another person who only attaches the milking machines. At the end of the carousel cycle, there's a person who performs the post-dipping. Then this cow is released by lot.
I see. So how many people are here?
Here, there are 4. 4 people working directly on the carousel during milking, and another person fetching the lots and bringing the animals to the waiting room.
Nice. How many were there before?
Before, we worked with 3 people.
So you ended up with one more person, but you went from 14 to 48 cows. So the system is technology. There's no doubt about that. You're increasingly professionalizing your activity by implementing a high-tech system. But as you mentioned, if the person there doesn't know exactly what they need to do at that moment, what if the first one makes a mistake?
Then it's a cascading effect. If they don't do a good pre-dipping, a proper stimulation of the cow won't release the milk. And if we don't respect the stimulation time, the cow won't release the milk. So what happens? She finishes the cycle, completes the turn on the carousel, and the milking isn't complete. Then this animal has to return for milking, or worse, if a cow leaves with milk still in the mammary gland, she risks developing an inflammatory process, mastitis, because the milk hasn't been expelled.
You mentioned something interesting, again, mastitis. Before it was about wet bedding. Here, it's about how the milking is done. What else could be impacting, for example, mastitis in the animals?
Mastitis is also related to the cleanliness of these animals. If the bedding is wet, the animals will be dirtier. What does this affect? The person doing the pre-dipping.
Is it the person here?
Exactly. Because if the cow comes in dirty, we can't wash the udder. We perform a pre-dipping, and we need to remove all that dirt to prevent contamination during milking. Why? Milking involves a process that has moisture and the cow's warmth. What do bacteria need? Heat and moisture. So if the person responsible for pre-dipping doesn't clean the cow well, and the milking cluster is applied to a dirty teat, this also predisposes the entry of bacteria into the mammary gland.
If a cow with mastitis enters here, does she pass it on to the others? No.
Yes, she does. Milking also serves as a vehicle for bacteria. That's why the farm has mastitis lots today. This mastitis lot is milked last to avoid cross-contamination during milking.
I understand. So there's a lot for those that produce more, a high production lot, those that produce less, and those with mammary gland inflammation.
Yes, those with mastitis.
And there's a sequence, it's not all at once.
No, no.
Which group do you start with?
We start with the high production cows, then the medium production cows, then the low production cows, followed by cows that have recovered from mastitis. And finally, those currently with an inflammatory process, those with mastitis.
Now, for those on the other side, folks, it's a careful process. If you want to destroy a herd, start with the mastitis cows first.
Exactly, because you'll be spreading it to all the other cows. When is the sphincter open? During milking. So at that moment, you're exposing the animal to the risk of bacteria entering the mammary gland.
That's interesting. If the person handling the cows touches the wrong cow, the wrong lot, they can ruin everything. What happens to a high production cow that's milked after a mastitis cow? What happens to that area, to that lot?
The cow comes into contact with the bacteria, and if her immune system is lower, that will be a problem for her, and the bacteria will thrive, leading to an inflammatory process. If she lies down afterward, she might leave contaminated milk residue there, potentially spreading it to more animals in the bedding. Mastitis is something those who work with dairy are familiar with, as it's part of the daily routine for those in the industry. But we implement all these processes, separating by lot, proper milking, well-prepared bedding, to what end? To reduce the incidence of new cases. Some animals are chronic. These animals are either cold or their teat is dried, something along those lines. But our role as farm veterinarians is to minimize, to reduce the incidence of new cases.
I see. So, regarding the milking process, I think we've managed to convey to everyone what really matters, which is getting the basics right. Separating the lots, the high production lot, the medium production lot, the low production lot, those that have already recovered, and finally, those with mastitis. That's the basics. The second point is training the people who are doing the milking. If the people don't know what they're doing and what they need to do, it could lead to problems. Exactly.
And knowing which bacteria are present on the farm, we have bacterial profiles, contagious and environmental. So you need to know what you're dealing with. That's why we have culture tools and antibiograms today, so we can develop strategies to minimize the damage from infections.
Which ones do you use here? How do you identify them today?
So, for example, when a cow is identified with mastitis, clinical mastitis clots, we collect a sample of her milk and send it to the lab. At the lab, we do a test called culture, which is where bacterial growth occurs. We then identify which bacteria are involved in that inflammatory process. From there, we can direct a treatment for that animal.
And you can identify this with the data you're collecting from them.
Exactly.
So you know exactly which animal and which bacteria that animal has. That's right?
Besides the individual SCC, we do monthly monitoring where we collect a sample from each animal during milking and send it to the lab. There we perform a somatic cell count. It will tell us how many thousands of cells are present. A healthy cow has fewer than 200,000 cells. Below that, she's healthy. Above that, she has some degree of infection. Clinical cows that show clots usually have over 1 million somatic cells. What is this exfoliation? When bacteria enter the mammary gland, the defense cells act on that foreign organism, increasing the somatic cell count. That's why we do this individual SCC. Those cows with a higher count are the ones with what we call subclinical mastitis. They don't show clinical signs like clots, but there is an alteration in somatic cell count.
And you can only know this by following the correct procedure.
Exactly.
So folks, we're going to wrap up this video with this lesson on milk quality management. It starts with the person bringing in the animals, then the animal enters. The people taking care of the milking need to be trained. You have to collect milk from these animals to know the SCC count for each one. Collecting this data will have to become basic for future generations. A farm can't sustain itself without identifying these details. And the system is very important. 1,800,000. But the workforce is also crucial. Without qualified labor, unfortunately, it's not possible to operate. So that's an important message for everyone. I think a challenge we can pose to those watching is to send something to us. I think that's interesting. It could also help someone who's just starting out or has some doubts. It could be showing a bit of their milking routine.
Yes, absolutely.
I think the milking routine is very important.
Very important.
What place is this?
This is the calf barn, Jesse. This is where the farm's young ones are kept.
So, this is where everything begins in the life of the cow. Why is this place important to you? What changes later in her life based on what happens here?
This is where her life begins. If we experience episodes of diarrhea or pneumonia here, it will compromise the cow's productive performance later on. If the calf goes through some episodes of diarrhea, there are studies showing a negative impact on her production once she becomes a cow, so this place is crucial. At this stage, she needs to be well cared for, well fed, and provided with comfort.
Diarrhea is something that can't be completely eliminated, but it can be reduced.
Absolutely.
What have you observed and what measures have you implemented to reduce the number of animals with diarrhea?
Well, it's all about doing the basics well. Providing the calf with high-quality colostrum and properly disinfecting the navel are essential steps that start right after birth. When the calf is born, it's weighed, and we calculate 10% of its body weight in colostrum. For example, a calf born weighing 40 kilograms receives 4 liters of colostrum. The colostrum we use here is tested using a refractometer to evaluate the IgG level. We do not provide colostrum with less than 25% Brix to our calves. The calves ingest colostrum with more than 25% IgG. For colostrum below that level, we enrich it with powdered colostrum. We also take care of the navel, disinfecting it daily for 3 to 5 days post-birth until it completely dries up and falls off.
Great. There's an interesting section in this book that talks about recommendations for feeding calves. And you can see what Vinicius just mentioned here. What Vinicius just explained is right here, isn't it, Vinicius? They use this equipment to assess colostrum quality. This farm also has automatic calf feeders, which we'll see later. How was it when you decided to acquire these feeders?
We faced a challenge because we had a large number of animals, and bottle feeding them throughout the entire lactation cycle became very demanding and exhausting. So we adopted this collective rearing system for its practicality. We register the calves with an identifier, and the machine itself regulates the increase and decrease of milk during these 90 days that they are fed.
I see. So this is where it all begins. They may look the same now, but their production will vary later if something is done incorrectly here.
Exactly, and even for the calf's development, for instance, if we have severe cases of diarrhea caused by coronavirus or rotavirus, it can reduce the intestinal cells, and then the cow or calf will absorb less of the food she consumes. These are some harmful effects resulting from diarrhea.
What is important to have in this environment for them?
Here they have access to water, a bit of feed to get familiar with the food, and a dry bed. We also place a fabric to keep it from getting too cold because as newborns, they are still developing their immune systems. So they need some comfort. They can't be too cold or too hot.
I see. So they start adapting to the food here, have water available at all times, and the bedding needs to be dry, right?
Yes, the environment needs to be dry. They stay here for 7 to 10 days, and then they move to another individual pen before joining the group.
I see. So they stay here for 7 to 10 days and then move to the other side. Let's go check out the other part. So, Vinicius, what is this area here?
So after they leave the individual pens, they stay here for a while, and then they are relocated to the group area, where they have access to the machines.
I see. So it's a process. They start there, come here, and what work is done with them here?
Here, they undergo regular feeding. They are given milk, water, and feed. It's the same as what happens down there.
The same thing that happens down there is done here. And after that, they leave here and move to the group area. It's important for them to go through this process here as well, right? Yes. What impact does the group phase have on them?
What happens is that we keep them in individual pens until they reach a certain size so they can compete here. Because here, they will be with other calves that are a bit older. So they will have to go to the machine on their own, feed themselves, drink milk, and engage in normal competition.
I see. And what is that canister doing over there in the corner?
It's feeding. That's the machine, the automatic feeder.
That's the automatic feeder, and when it feels hungry, it goes there?
Exactly. Free access. Whenever it feels like feeding, it goes to the machine. The machine recognizes the animal by the tag, and depending on its age, it adjusts the amount of milk provided each day.
I see. So what you mentioned about the identification tag or chip is also used here for the machine to identify the animal, and then it releases the milk according to the animal's size. It knows that this one needs more milk and that one needs less milk, right?
Yes.
That's what it does. What challenges did you face years ago with the calf barn, and what did you notice that could have been preventing you from achieving the production levels you have today?
Well, regarding calf rearing, it's crucial to have proper rearing with consistent management practices because anything they suffer here will impact them later as future cows, right? So, if they go through an episode of diarrhea, it will result in reduced production later on, slower development, and consequently, we will have to breed this heifer later, increasing the age at first calving, which results in a lower financial return and higher costs.
There are a lot of details, because this is your investment, you're starting the process, and if the beginning goes wrong, you'll feel the consequences later on. So this is a place that needs attention and staff training as well. How is the cleaning of the equipment, the bottles handled here?
At all times, they receive 2 feedings a day, those in individual pens in the morning and in the afternoon. After the milk is provided, the bottles are cleaned with hot water and left to drain. Those are the bottles for the milk barn.
I see. That's excellent. That's excellent because, folks, you can see that everything has a process, and each process has its details. Every time you skip a step or don't do it properly, you'll feel it later on. As you mentioned before, the animal responds immediately, but here it takes a little longer. You don't see the drop in milk production right away because this is just the beginning. So every bit of care is crucial, and the access to water and food that you have here is important. If these animals miss a meal for a day, what happens?
Oh, then we lose performance. The staff here does monthly weighing, so we monitor their weight gain. If there's a lack or deprivation of food, they won't convert it into weight. So there will be a decrease in their development.
And is weight the main goal at this moment?
Yes, they need to grow and gain weight.
They need to grow and gain weight. Excellent. She leaves here, comes over here, and what's over there?
Until 40 days of age, the calf stays here. After 40 days, they go to another paddock. Why? If we mix these 2 groups, the older group will overpower this one, so these younger calves would face a lot of competition and struggle. So we separate them by age and weight to better manage access to the feeders.
I see. Is the rearing done here or elsewhere?
No, we do it on another farm.
Oh, cool. So the rearing is done on another farm. What difference has that made for you? Why did you decide to do that?
It was mainly due to space, we leased another farm that already had a barn, and it used to operate as a dairy farm. We decided to move the rearing animals there to have better control. Today, the entire rearing process is also done in confinement.
I see. Vinicius, what happens here? What are these coolers, and what's the process here?
So the machine heats the milk. It has a coil that warms the milk. When the milk arrives, it is stored in these coolers at around 4 degrees Celsius. Then, as the calf approaches, the machine recognizes the calf and it starts the milk intake process. The machine draws the milk from the coolers at 4 degrees, passes it through the coil, heats it up to around 36 degrees, and only then does the calf drink the milk.
Folks, now we're going to talk a little bit about the farm's future projects, what Vinicius, along with the owners and the farm team, are planning. There are always things that need improvement, as on any farm, and to go from 24 to 30 or 40,000 liters of milk per day, some changes will need to be made. What are you thinking? What are your ideas?
Exactly, Jesse. We noticed a challenge with the current calf barn structure we have. So, our next project is to invest in an adequate calf barn. We plan to build a new structure, a barn with a higher ceiling, and redesign the logistics of this calf barn. Since we've already invested in barns for the cows and a carousel milking system, now we're going to invest in a calf barn as well.
I see. What was here before?
This is a repurposed structure. It used to be an old pigsty. We adapted it to our reality. Of course, there are things that need improvement, so we're already thinking about this new investment to continually improve the rearing of calves, to allow them to express even more of their genetic potential.
So, for those of you on the other side, many times people want to build a lot, but you can reuse things. A lot here was repurposed, and it works, it's functional, it solves the problem. Do you plan to move this to another location, or will it stay here?
No, we're going to move. We're planning to move to another part of the farm for logistical reasons. Today, we want to place the calf barn closer to the prepartum area so that the transportation of the newborn calves is not so harsh. So we want to move the calf straight from the prepartum pen to the maternity area.
Why is that important? What impact does this logistics change have on the animal's life, considering that you're saying it's not yet adequate?
Well, today we place the newborn calf in a wooden pen with some straw, but there's a risk of injury as it moves from the prepartum area to here. The time after birth before receiving colostrum is crucial. The longer the time since birth before the calf ingests colostrum, the worse it is. Why? Because when the calf starts absorbing the immunoglobulins from the colostrum to build its immunity, if it takes more than 3 to 4 hours, the intestines start closing and then it won't absorb them effectively. So we want the calf barn to be closer so that within 2 to 3 hours of birth, the calf receives colostrum. Its navel is treated, which will result in less diarrhea, less pneumonia, and overall better development for the calf.
I see. So when the calf is born, the priority is to give it colostrum. And if the farm doesn't have efficient logistics, this might be delayed. So your future project is to make this closer to the prepartum area, which is very interesting. Is it possible to show people where the prepartum area is today?
Yes, from here you can see the roof of the barn. The prepartum area is over there. The calves are brought here to the calf barn after they're born.
I see. Vinicius, if the person in charge doesn't understand the importance of colostrum administration after birth, they can't make a decision like this.
Exactly.
They can't think that this is impacting the animal. So, if you haven't studied colostrum administration prepartum, postpartum, or don't understand the process, check out our videos, our materials, the classes with Dr. Hutchins, the classes we have at Santa Fe. I'm sure any doubts you have will be cleared up. You'll find content that will meet your needs. And now the challenge is for you to show us how you clean your equipment. We want to see how you clean the bottles for these animals, what the bedding is like for them, so that others can learn as well. So post, share on social media, tag Santa Fe, send it to us, and we'll repost it. This will be interesting. It will give ideas to other producers and also show what really matters. As Vinicius said, it's about doing the basics well. Agreed? A big hug, and see you in the next video.